Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about some new multichrome shadows that launched from Lethal Cosmetics. Lethal Cosmetics is a German-based indie brand, and they did send these shadows to me in PR, and they also, along with these, launched some really shimmery, sparkly shadows, which I will do a different dedicated video on, so stay tuned for that. But today, I'm going to be focusing on the multichromes. We're going to look at some swatches, some swatch comparisons, as well as eye swatches on the lid. They have previously released some multichromes, which I do have videos on, and these are basically more pastel with no base, a little bit more colorful. Some of these tones are a little bit more neutral, especially the yellow, the orange, and then the pink or coral shadow. And then we've got the purple, green, and the yellow. So they are a bit different from some of the other multichromes they have. They have some iridescent multichromes as well as some black-based multichromes. They have really amped up their shimmer formula, so I'm really excited to see how these are on the lids. Some of their first multichromes I personally wasn't a huge fan of. Some of them were very, very satin-like and just to me did not quite hold up to multichromes from other brands. But since then they have come out with better formula. So let's get right into it. First shade I'm going to be swatching is Andromeda, and I'm going to be picking it up on the Refer 21 brush. It is a little bit on the flaky side, just a little, so I'm going to be just gently misting it just to help avoid at least some fallout. And I do not have anything on my lid because otherwise this would be just very, very hard on my eyes if I did put on primer every time. At least this way it's just the eyeshadow that I'm taking off. Hopefully I won't have too much fallout. I really don't want to have to switch out my lashes. So that looks so beautiful. This would be a great one and done kind of shadow. And I'm just kind of feathering out the edges. So that looks very, very smooth on the lid. I'm definitely curious to use my finger. Except this red shift, look at how metallic that is. So it looks textured in the pan, but when I picked it up with my pinky, it was super, super smooth already, and I didn't feel any sort of texture. So that's kind of just like one layer, and then I'm just gonna add on a little bit more. Let's just see how much I can build it up. Obviously, I'm dry swatching this with my pinky on a bare lid, so it'd be a bit different, probably a little bit more opaque if you use some sort of a tacky primer. Another beautiful one and done shadow. Back to the brush, and I misted it again, and this is Spectrum. So smooth. I'm so pleasantly surprised on how these are not textured once they're on the lid. I really, really like that. This is, again, another beautiful one and done shadow. Oh, it's so shiny without like any chunkiness. It looks so beautiful. I feel like this one is so far the shiftiest. Next up, Supernova. So see how it picks up a little chunky, but it's like a smooth chunky, not like a dry flaky chunky. But then it just looks super smooth on the lid, and that is stunning. Again, I misted my brush, so I got a little bit of assistance from that. Oh, this one is very sheer. Again, probably could build it up over a tacky primer. So beautiful. Here's Infinity, and you can see how differently this one picked up. This one, even just in the pan, looks very, very smooth. A bit different. This one reminds me of the formula they have in the Wildflower palette, which I love that one because it's just such a flattering kind of formula for any eye. This one is less shifty. I think the shift on here is pretty subtle. Especially on the lid, you're gonna really, if it's already subtle in the pan, it's going to be even more subtle on the lid, but it is so dimensional. Another great summery one and done shadow. But I think you can see that this one has a little bit of less shine to it, not just less shift. Still beautiful though. And then last up is Hyperspace. This is also a smoother shadow. Oh, that is so beautiful. That is one hell of a green shadow. Beautiful. You could also definitely use this one all over the lid as a one and done shadow because it completely feathers out to just like your skin tone. So there's no gray base, no brown base, no nothing. And I love these kinds of shadows. Definitely my kind of favorite as of recently, just really been getting into these kinds of shadows more. This one is a bit less shifty. It's very hard to see, but it does look dimensional. First up for comparison is Red Shift. I think it's very, very similar to Obsession from ShineBySD as well as Electra from Devinah. I think that they have a very similar sparkle effect. I think the tone of Obsession is a little bit different. It's a little bit more vibrant. And even the shifts are somewhat similar. And then Eden from Odin's Eye is essentially like a stronger based version and less sparkly. Sparkly wise, I think all three, Redshift, Obsession, and Electra, are almost about the same. Redshift being a little less sparkly, but it's also the smoothest. Obsession and Electra have a little bit of texture to them. And we have Spectrum, and I think this one is a very common shade. I've definitely seen it before. This one was very easy to pick out. These are all very, very, very similar. I think Cherry Blossom is the most opaque in terms of swatching, and I think it has a lot to do with the formula of it. So it feels a little bit waxier, a little bit thicker. And Summer Flower is basically this shadow, but a satin version. So if you already have any of these, definitely don't think that you need this one, though I do really enjoy the formula of Spectrum. Well, none of these are complete direct dupes to Infinity. I think that Lucent is probably the closest. I honestly thought Autumn Leaves would be a lot more similar, but it is very, very, very yellow. It's almost like a gold. And it does shift to a green, which I feel like is very hard to capture with this shade. Daybreak is very, very smooth, and so is Lucent. I think Infinity just has a little bit more oomph to it, a little bit more shine compared to those. And Vela is very, very sparkly. And the shade The All has just so many flecks throughout it, so I don't think it's really even close at all. So I'm glad to have Infinity in my collection. On to Supernova. This one is another pretty common shadow. I think Galen from Devinah is almost spot on. Galen is a little bit more sparkly and maybe a little bit piecey, but they even have similar flecks throughout them. And Spectrum might be a little bit more opaque, but it really is about just how much you put on, like what kind of layer. Yummy from Glam Shop has a very thick formula. It's way more blue because it has a aqua base to it, and it is a pretty thick formula. Fireflies and Sugar Lilac are just very, very smooth. Sugar Lilac's more of a sheen. It's even more translucent than the rest of these. It's the most translucent one out of all of these. It's almost like an iridescent shadow. Look at all these beautiful vibrant greens. I'm loving what's going on here. There's definitely some different shifts going on. I think the last three are pretty different for this Away From My Wrist. So I would roll those out as like really dupes per se. Sugar Mint is shifting to almost like a pinky red, while Perked Up and Retro are more blue. There's just a little bit of similarity of like, I also see a little bit of purple. I'm not really sure if any of these are really actually that close. There's definitely some textural differences, specifically Radial Velocity being very, very sparkly, and so is Moon Me. Twinkle Toots is also very, very sparkly, but it has a very, very light base to it. It almost looks a little bit brownish, but it does also shift to a blue versus Moon Me does not. I feel like Moon Me shade might be actually a duochrome. Andromeda is such a beautiful shade, but I definitely have plenty to compare this one to. From my angle, Aurum Regalia looks way too gold yellow. They just don't have that dusty baby pink base like Andromeda. Peach for the Stars is a little bit thicker. I did repress this one, so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it, but it picks up a little bit flaky, but it completely smooths out, but you do get kind of a lot. Maya from Odin's Eye, obviously pretty different, very, very fiery orangey and translucent. Scylla as well has a lot more gold in it, no pink base. And Mustafa is pretty much more like an iridescent multichrome shadow. So just some of my first impressions. I haven't done any looks with these yet, but I have tried so many multichromes at this point, and I feel like especially with eye swatches, you can really get a feel for the shadow already. You can get these 6 for a bundle of $89 from their website, which is amazing, or they are $16.50 individually, which I think is pretty standard for these kinds of shadows. I really hope to see Lethal Cosmetics expand their multichromes even further at some maybe some gray based, browner based multichromes. I think that they're an amazing option. Who is not US based, I would definitely recommend these if you do not want to order from US based indie brands because the shipping is very, very high. So I do totally understand that. Now, if you are US based, you can probably get something very similar to some of these. You might already have some similar shadows. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below if you picked any of these up and what you think of them, or if you plan on picking them up, which shade or shades are on your wish list. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.